Good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone here to the Cadillac Planning Commission here for November 25th, 2024. If I could ask everyone to please join me in the pledge, and we'll keep this in motion. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Roll call, please, Danielle.
Wilkins.
Here.
Post.
Here.
Rice.
Here.
Bunce.
Here.
Bosher.
Here.
Bauman. Fent.
Here.
Van Pelt.
Here.
Putvin.
Here. Thank you. Need an approval of the agenda again for November 25th, 2024.
So moved.
Mayor,
Second it.
Kevin?
Yep.
Putvin.
Yes.
Bosher.
Yes.
Bauman. Van Pelt.
Here.
Fent.
Yes.
Rice.
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Post.
Yes.
Bunce.
Yes.
And hopefully everyone had a chance again, so I need approval here of October 28th, 2024 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Bauman. Fent.
Yes.
Bunce.
Yes.
Wilkins.
Yes.
Van Pelt.
Yes.
Rice.
Yes.
Bosher.
Yes.
Putvin.
Yes.
Post.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, this evening we have two public hearings. We have an application filed by Gary. I don't want to kill Gary's last name. Pitch. Pitch. Thank you. Well, I'd rather be correct than incorrect. Anyway, to vacate a portion of West Nelson Street, described as portion of West Nelson Street, running northeasterly of North Lake Street. Having read this, I think Danielle
Yes.
is
Yep.
gonna go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there is an application before the planning commission from Gary requesting to vacate a portion of West Nelson Street for this development. And this is not working.
The green square.
It's not working. There we go. All right. So Gary owns the properties selected in blue. The vacation request is described as a portion of West Nelson Street running northeasternly of North Lake Street. It would be the green section in this photo. The blue section is a portion of West Nelson Street that has already been vacated back in 1988. This request is set before the Planning Commission as Section 20-4 within the Cadillac Code of Ordinance reads that City Planning Commission may by resolution or ordinance vacate a street or alley, make that recommendation to City Council. And the reasoning for this request, the applicant is proposing to build 2 apartment buildings, each containing 24 units for a total of 48. Staff supports this vacation. This vacation will allow for future development of the property. The recommendation before the Planning Commission would be to approve this and recommend to City Council to approve the vacation as presented.
Thank you. Any questions for Danielle? Okay. This portion seems okay. Pretty upfront. Entertain a motion. Oh, I can't do that.
Open public hearing.
I'm just moving right along. I want to go.
You have to open the public hearing.
Having a senior moment. Okay. So before, all right, we have no questions for her. So at this time, I will open the public hearing about the alley vacation that Danielle just enlightened everybody about. If anybody has anything to say for or against, please come forwards.
I will.
Hi.
Name is Mark Lagerway.
I think there's a lot of things we don't agree on about what's true, but one thing we all do agree on is that it's true that we have a housing shortage here and everywhere. And I just want to encourage you, those of us who have been advocating for housing, have worked hard for several years for the Alliance for Economic Success and Housing Advocacy Committee through that group to bring housing to Cadillac. And you all know, anecdotally or statistically, the needs. You can talk to any of the industry people who say that they're stymied from expanding because people can't find enough housing. There's no vacancies. So let's move and let's get this done. It's a win for us. It's a win for Cadillac. And we have to be flexible with our zoning ordinances and other features to make sure that we create the housing that's needed in this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Also, there is going to be a public hearing and public comment period for the next public hearing, which will be the actual North Lake Street Flats project. So, you know, if you want to talk just about the vacation,
Just
this
the
would be the
alley,
time.
not
Or if you
fully.
want to talk about the project,
Right.
the next one would be appropriate.
Okay.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Carrie Vandermolen. I am the Director of the Housing Commission here in Cadillac. I also sit on the Housing North Board as their representative presenting Wexford County. I'm also very involved with the Alliance for Economic Success. Now, of course, what we do at the Housing Commission is we work with subsidized housing. I have up to a 5-year wait list for apartments in Wexford County in the city of Cadillac. It's not getting any better. I have we did a survey, Housing North did in 2023, which shows some statistics for the next 5 years. I'm not going to bore everybody with it, but I will go through just a couple of points within this. First of all, I absolutely am in support of this proposal. We need all types of housing in Wexford County. The Housing Commission averages 50 to 75 calls a day. People asking for low-income housing, but we figure we get 1 to 2 calls a day of people just asking for any housing. A lot of people don't know what it is that we do. I did the math, that's about 250 calls a year. Just for regular housing, people are besides themselves because they can't find anywhere to live. This affects everybody because there are entrepreneurs that currently are living here that cannot expand their businesses due to the lack of qualified employees being able to find housing in the area. In addition, schools have lost applicants as well as teachers and administrators that were here have left because they just simply can't find a place to raise their family in Cadillac or Wexford County. Within this survey, what I found the most compelling was that between the years of 2023 and 2027, we will have a rental housing gap of under 700 units. We will not be able to stock enough to house the current population, much less new residents that want to move to the area. And this affects everybody in the community as it will stagnate current businesses as well as stop people from spending money in our community. To close, if folks can't start a new business or expand an existing business, or if CAPS can't find good qualified teachers to educate our children or the economy, it simply can't grow, and it affects everyone. Again, I support this. If anybody wants any of this information, I have my card here. I'm more than willing to email this to anyone. I'll put my cards down here. But not only low-income housing, workforce housing, we need all kinds of housing in the county. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Okay, just to remind everyone what John just said, we're gonna talk about what you brought up is the next public hearing. So right now, we just need to focus on this alley, right this second is all,
Street right away, yeah.
okay?
The Nelson Street right away,
Yes,
yes.
okay. So,
I do have a question, and it is pertinent to just the street right away.
That's fine.
Okay. just
Yep.
to clarify.
good evening.
Good evening, Cindy Tomaszewski. So with respect to the vacation of this alley, does the status of that vacation depend upon completion of the project? So I guess my question is, if for some reason this project does not happen or is not completed, is the vacation of this roadway considered permanent? Like it remains vacated even if the project is not completed? Is that correct?
It'll be up to council, but if we make the
My
recommendation.
apologies. Assuming that the council moved forward with your recommendation, then,
Mr. Chair, you can put that in your motion if you.
Okay.
okay.
What would you like it to be?
I guess I personally would prefer it to be tied to the project so that if the project was not completed, it would revert back to being just a city street. But that's just strictly an opinion, so.
Okay.
I would defer to city staff, but I was just curious if it was indeed tied, so.
Ma'am, do you have a specific reason you would like to do that?
No, I just wasn't sure based on, precedent, whether the vacation of this property, should the project not continue, what would become with respect to the status of that property? Is it basically just a gift to Gary at that point? Or does it revert back to being a city street? So,
Okay.
thanks.
Anybody else for this vacation of West Nelson? Good evening.
Good evening, Planning Commission. Randy Lindell.
Hi, Rand.
What's up?
You're up right now.
Okay, so's Trump.
Yeah.
Okay, here we go again. The city's starting to tweak more ordinances to benefit certain individuals, businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So I oppose the vacating the city of the alley and the right-of-ways for this project to continue on. The city's continued to tweaking ordinances, and this has been going on too long. And also along with that, well, we'll get into the housing shortages later, but no, we should not allow the variance or vacate the alleys for this project to proceed. It doesn't need to happen. The only thing that's happening is the people of the city of Cadillac, the citizens, our taxes aren't going down, but the developers are getting breaks. And also, along with that, they're making money on our money, and that's not right. So I oppose the city tweaking the ordinances, changing any ordinances to allow for this project to continue. It is what it is.
Thank you, Randy. Good evening, Pat.
Hi, everybody.
Tell everybody else your name just.
My name is Pat Ponzak.
Thank you.
I live in Cadillac. And I think sometimes tweaks are a good idea, and I think sometimes tweaks are not a good idea. I understand that we have a housing shortage, and I'd like to see something happen to help that. And I think apparently vacating this alley leads us one step closer to alleviating somewhat of our housing shortage that we have here in town. Thanks.
Thank you, Pat. Anyone else? Okay. At this time, we'll go ahead and close public hearing, at least on Part A. Part B is coming. Okay. Group, you've heard? Any questions? Anything?
Well, yeah, I do. I'm not sure if maybe Danielle can answer it, or somebody over there. The alley used to be platted further through, was vacated back in The 80s, you said?
Yeah, I believe it was 1988 by
Okay.
ordinance, just same way that you guys are doing today.
There is no alley base there, it goes nowhere.
Essentially, yeah. So what's in green is the portion has not been vacated. The portion in blue has already been vacated.
Okay. And the city maintains that year-round, keeping it mowed and,
Yeah.
Well, it's just a paper street at this time, so there's no maintenance required.
somebody's mowing it.
Oh, that type of maintenance, yes.
Okay. But it goes nowhere.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
30 years ago, when I moved here, there was no housing for anybody. And the reason I'm on this board is because I railed on Gordon Boss so hard about it. He said, I'm glad you said something. They got an opening on the board. And here I am. And for 30 years, we've been all talking about the same thing over and over and over. So all we can do is we can build more, allow things to happen. I don't see a big thing with, in my opinion, with vacating this. It goes nowhere. It's of no use to anybody. And if it allows apartments to come in, to allow people, young people to come in, or whoever, to come in and man the industries. And I work with a lot of young people, and they can't find any place to live. And people have left because of that. And we need to really, in my opinion, we need to really allow this stuff like this to happen.
Is that a motion?
That's a motion.
Good job. Anybody want to second that?
Evan, do we want to
Let's,
tie that to this project? How do you feel about that?
Well, let me ask you something. If the gentleman who's doing this project, has he purchased all this property other than this thing? So he owns it anyway. So, I mean, we can put a thorn in his side and say no. But if he owns it all, why not vacate it and just say, okay, here you go. He's got no excuse not to build it, my opinion. Sorry, I feel pretty strong about this, guys.
Or build something?
Yeah, because I had such a hard time finding a place for myself and my family when I moved here. So, any support?
Support?
I'll support.
Kevin, I know where your motion came from,
Rice?
but can we just be a little? There was
Okay,
just sorry.
I would like to propose that we vacate this parcel, whatever you want to call it, this street, and allow the builder or the person to own the whole thing regardless if he's going to do it or not. Because if he doesn't, then somebody will.
So you're recommending that council approve.
I recommend the council approves this.
And did we have a second?
Mr. Rice.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. All right. Van Pelt,
Yes.
Rice,
Yes.
Bauman, Filkins,
Yes.
Bunce,
Yes.
Host,
Yes.
Putvin,
Yes.
Bosher,
Yes.
Bent.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, part B of this puzzle / public hearing, to refresh my own self. Anyway, we have an application filed by Michael Lake. And, yeah, Vanesco, Construction. Sorry on my words here, I don't want to kill it. So, on behalf of the owner of the properties, Gary Pitch, located on parcel numbers, which I am not going to rattle off all 6 of those, so I'm going to use the address of 318 Lake, which is someplace in something I read, instead of all these numbers. So again, on 318 Lake Street for a residential planned unit development. That's our initials are PUD. Site plan approval to build 2 apartment / buildings totaling 48 units. Danielle, are you, or no, Mr. Wallace is going to take us. Thank you, sir.
I have a presentation to give on the development, and then when I get done, Gary Pitch is here to add some comments on some pieces that I'm not quite as familiar with, but I was focused more on the zoning aspects, and so I'll cover that first. The application was filed by Gary Pitch Also, he's in partnership with the Veneclausen Company, and Michael Lake is the representative from Veneclausen. And they put in a joint application for a residential planned unit development. And the residential planned unit development is also approved by a special use permit. So essentially, as you look through the site plan, you'll be looking for it to comply with the residential planned unit development requirements, but then also the general requirements of the special land use. I covered half of this already. The project site is 1.27 acres, and the project involves the construction of two 24-unit apartment buildings. As was shown on the previous public hearing, the project site is outlined in this aerial photo in the red. And you can see that there's a number of parcels that make up this site. One of the things that the recommended approval would probably be based on is the consolidation of all those lots into one parcel for the benefit of the RPUD. The project, for those that aren't familiar with this site, is behind the G&D Pizza. It's also across the street from the Wexford County Administration Building. To the south is the Rummel Orthodontics. It's just on the next block north of this location where City Hall is. The next several slides give you somewhat of a photographic image of the project site as well as some of the surrounding development. You can see right now that the site is vacant of any buildings. It's primarily in a natural state, has some tree cover, also has old asphalt from when I believe this site was used as a used car lot quite a few years ago. With respect to adjacent land uses, located to the southwest of the site, not directly west, but southwest, is a condominium project. It's a 3-story project, but again, it's in ownership, but it is a multifamily development. Directly west of the site is the Wexford County Administration Building. You can see the images of it here. It's a real basic building with administrative offices and associated parking on the north end. To the south, you have the Rummel Orthodontics office, as can be seen in the photograph. To the east, you have the G&D Pizza. Of course, it was a former car dealership, so there's an amazing amount of asphalt connected with that property. That's why you're seeing all the asphalt. But in the distance there is an actual G&D store and pizza place. But that's what it looks like with a photo taken from the project site. And then to the north, you have single-family residential homes, as can be seen in the photo. You're looking at the rear yards of those residential homes. The project involves 2 apartment buildings, and each of them will contain 24 units for a total of 48 units. The apartment breakdown, you can see, is given in this slide. There's going to be 2 studio units, 34 1-bedroom units, and 12 2-bedroom units. And you can see the associated square footages associated with the different size of apartment units to give you an idea of the type of space that would be available for those apartment units. The density for the project is 37.8 dwelling units per acre. For comparison purposes, if you're looking, say, at a recently approved project, which was phase 1 of Cadillac Lofts, that building was built at a density of 42.2 units per acre. So the density level of this project would be below what it was for the Cadillac lofts. Of course, there's less project land, but if you look at the just density per acre, it is a lower number than for Cadillac lofts. The proposed site plan is pretty basic. The two apartment buildings are going to be set fairly close to Lake Street. There's going to be one entrance to the project. That entrance will be where the vacated Nelson Street right-of-way was. So that access would be at that point, and then it would go back and feed to a parking aisle that runs to the rear of the property and runs across the entire rear section of the project, really creating kind of a T formation with the entry point and the associated parking. And as mentioned earlier, you know what the various apartment unit types would be and their sizes. In terms of what the project would look like, the apartments, they have submitted sketches. These are the various building elevations which look at each side of the project. This is what they would look like on the Lake Street side if you were going down Lake Street, and that's the west elevation. The east elevation, of course, would be the G&D side. There's no ready development on that side that people would be looking at, but nonetheless, it would have a very similar look than the west side or the frontage view of the apartments. And then you have the north and south side images, the elevation views of the project. And again, they look very, very similar in their design. In discussing site access, circulation, and parking, access to the site would be by a driveway which enters the site between the two proposed buildings, which leads to the parking access aisle, which extends across the rear of the property. The entry drive is 24 feet wide, which is our standard recommendation for two-way parking access in a parking lot. In the rear, the parking aisle is proposed at 22 feet, which is a little bit less. Our ordinance goes down and allows for down to as low as 20 feet. In this case, they are proposing 22 feet, which is between what the ordinance allows and what our standard recommendation would normally be. There are proposed to be 69 parking spaces. That would include 4 handicap spaces, and that translates into 1.44 parking spaces per unit. For comparison, phase 1 of the Cadillac's loft, which was a mixed-use plant unit development, it was approved with as low as 1 parking space per unit. Staff believes the proposed parking spaces are adequate for downtown location based on a standard of 1 space per unit for studio units and 1-bedroom units and 1.5 spaces for 2-bedroom units. Using these standards, 54 parking spaces would be required. If you wanted to raise the requirement to 2 spaces per unit on the 2-bedroom, it would still only require 60 parking spaces, which is they're providing 9 more spaces than that amount. So I think it is a reasonable proposal. There is a movement now in planning. Many communities are actually literally throwing out their minimum parking standards for all uses, not just residential. I think that's a bit extreme. But that being said, I think if you're not eliminating your parking minimums, I think the trend is for most communities to reduce their parking minimums. And part of that, too, is when you get into the housing cost and housing availability, you see figures of up to, $12,000 being added, per cost to a dwelling unit for each additional parking space you require. So you really want to be careful that you don't go overboard with the parking, because it either translates into a higher housing purchase situation, or in the case of rentals, it results in higher rental rates for that unit. The parking spaces along the main entry drive are 9 feet by 20 feet in depth. The ordinance requirement is typically 20 feet in depth. We allow down to 9 feet in width, so it does meet ordinance requirements. The parking spaces in the double bay across the rear of the property are 9 feet wide as well, which is okay, and 19 feet in depth. That is 1 foot off the typical requirement that we require on our stalls. However, we do have the ability to consider that dimension based on it being a planned unit development. I don't think that's a terrible depth for the stalls. I see a lot of ordinances that go down to as low as 18 feet on their typical parking space dimensions. The radii have been changed since the initial proposal was made. The radii were increased due to fire department recommendations. For the entry drive, it is 30 feet on the entry radiuses to the driveway. And for the parking bay in the rear, you have radiuses of 20 and 27. And in the revised plans, they show geometrics showing how a garbage truck could access on those drives, as well as a City of Cadillac fire truck could access onto those drives. So the fire department is satisfied that with these dimensions, they can properly service the apartments. Also, they are proposing bike racks on the property. The city zoning ordinance also provides for a parking space credit when bicycle parking is provided at the rate of 1 parking space for each 4 bicycle spaces provided. And the site plan provides for 4 bicycle racks. I'm not sure how many are allowed in each one, but Gary might be able to address that later. So there could be considered a credit for parking given the bicycle rack parking. The drainage is going to be a little more complex. It's been a work in process. The original site plan had a proposed wall which was going to capture the rainwater coming off the G&D site and send it northward. I'm not sure the eventual path for that. Since that time, Gary has worked with our city engineer and one of the representatives from G&D, and they've worked out a proposal to negotiate for a 10 to 12 foot wide easement whereby the North Lake Street Flats project would be able to absorb the drainage coming off of the G&D site and handle that drainage within the 10 or 12 foot easement that would be created on the west side of this project site. Now the drainage for this project itself will be located underground, and it would be located under the main access drive or the parking areas immediately off of Lake Street, and that drainage would be handling everything for the development site itself. Now it is slightly oversized, so if there's some water that goes into the easement that cannot be handled, it would overflow into the drainage network for this project. And then ultimately, if both were overloaded, then it would then go into the city system. So it would be increasing capacity over what we have right now, and it would be a better situation for the area in terms of drainage than it is right now, because right now some of the drainage that comes down off of G&D goes to that berm. It gets shifted out to the street system and can cause problems in the area during heavy rains. And that amount will be reduced in the future because of this drainage retention system that they're setting up. I'm suggesting that any approval to this project would include final review and approval of the drainage network by our city engineer, and she's been very key in negotiating between the parties to set up something that would work better, not only for both property owners, but for the city as well. Landscaping, we believe the plan is satisfactory. They've tried to put in as much landscaping as possible given the land availability. They've optimized the tree and shrub plantings, and the proposed landscape materials do meet the zoning ordinance requirements in terms of plant types and sizes. They also have a proposed screen dumpster on the site, and it's also placed in a location which does not have high visibility, which is on the very back of the project, directly in from the primary entry. But that dumpster would also be screened as well. Lighting, they have agreed to submit a photometric lighting plan. It hasn't been submitted yet. Typically, these are very straightforward. The consultants submit a photometric plan which gives contour lines or data points for the entire parking lot, which states what the lighting levels are, and our engineer typically reviews those, that they're at the minimum standard that we normally require for lighting levels in the parking lot. We expect that lighting plan to be forthcoming probably within a week or so. The special land use standards, as I mentioned, with the residential planned unit development, that our PUD must meet the general standards. I haven't gone through all the slides here. I have included all the reviews in your staff report, and so I've concluded that those have been met. Also, the City Council did approve an amendment to the zoning ordinance which allows the Planning Commission to consider RPUDs of less than 5 acres in size. That might be something that somebody doesn't automatically know because it was a fairly recent change to the ordinance, and that's valid through April of next year. And it also allows the Planning Commission to consider variations to the design standards for an RPUD as part of their consideration. With respect to the special land use, the standards that are included in the staff report, they relate to harmony with the surrounding development, enjoyment of adjacent property, improvement to the property, being non-hazardous to adjacent property, having sufficient public utilities, and being consistent with the zoning ordinance and master plan. I've responded to each of those individually, essentially determining that they do meet those general standards. Zoning considerations, not that it necessarily has to meet the district that it's in, because you do have the ability to vary it, but in the B1 district in which it is located, the the setbacks are for the front yard 10 feet, side yard 15 feet, and the rear yard 25 feet. All of those setbacks are met with this proposed site plan. Also, the building height, which is 39 feet, falls within the district height maximum, which is 40 feet for the B1 district. So there's no issues with respect to building height or meeting building setbacks. Recommended motion, staff does support approving this project. The recommended motion would be to approve this application and final site plan for the North Lake Streets Flats Residential Planned Unit Development by Special Use Permit, subject to the following conditions: that all lots be consolidated into one lot, that the Nelson Street vacation be successfully achieved, that all department head requirements through the site plan review be satisfactorily resolved and approved. And in that particular case, I think we are almost there with a few minor exceptions. That the easement agreement between the applicant and G&D be executed and a copy be supplied to the city. and any other conditions as required by the Planning Commission in their consideration of this project. And that's my presentation, and I told Gary that if he wanted to add some things from his perspective on the project that might not be zoning related, that he could share that information right now.
Thank you, everyone.
Your name, please.
My name's Gary Pitch.
Thank you, Gary.
I can sign in. I think this project is, people have asked me about the density, and it's complaining that it's going to be where the density is it meets a model that the state put out for us to meet in order to get a grant that we did get from the state to help build this project. This is going to be workforce housing, not low-income housing. So there's a formula that we meet the 90% of the area medium income for the housing. 60% would be low income, so we're at the middle. 120 is, up higher. So this project is going to bring in young professionals to the area, where they will have a place to get work, and these applicants will be vetted they have to have a job, and will meet the needs for being able to pay the rent, and they'll have good credit background. And I think this project will help build a connection to the downtown business with the addition of the 48 full-time residences. And I think the city of Cadillac has done a great job with their Cadillac Commons Farmers Market and the Performing Arts Pavilion and the Lakefront Park. So this is going to help bolster that image that we have there. So that's what I have to say. I don't know if there's any questions.
Oh, yeah, we got questions. Gary, I didn't, or I couldn't find it.
You
and
haven't opened the public
I
hearing
know,
yet.
but I'm king and asking the question.
I'm actually here in support of Gary, if you don't mind.
Oh, perfect.
Okay. My name is Michael Lake. I'm actually the applicant. I am the senior project manager at Venaclausen Construction that'll be responsible for overseeing the project. Venaclausen Construction.
Thank you.
Appreciate the commission's time. Appreciate everybody who's here on behalf of the project, pro and against. Happy to always hear comments and take those into consideration as we're trying to better involve the community. So thank you for being here. Thank you for the overview of the project. That was very thorough and detailed and saves a lot on my end trying to help answer questions. I think you answered a lot of them. So thank you very much for that. As Gary mentioned, 48 units. This is what we would consider a market rate development. It is not a low-income housing, a government subsidized in that aspect of how it is defined and determined. So it is more of a market rate workforce housing development project. The grant that Gary has mentioned is that of the MEDC, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, which is in support of helping developers make it affordable for them to help build within our communities to help solve some of the needs that we have heard tonight about Cadillac and available housing for its communities. So we are excited to be a part of the project. We thank Gary for his trust in us and his intent of trying to help better the community and its development for housing needs. The only thing that, to go with the photometric, we do not have the photometric actually submitted as stated. This is going to be a design build project within our realm where we will hire engineers as part of our electrician's scope of work. So that'll be developed through later in the state of the project. We are happy to have that as a contingent type item of being approved by the commission for the project to continue to move forward, and we'll supply that as necessary for review and approval. The bicycles that were mentioned as far as the parking spaces, we do have 8 spaces in 2 different locations. So there's a total of 4 in one location, 4 in another. So there's 8 total that we have provided and plan on maintaining within some extent of the project. And then within the photometric as well, we do intend fully on having what we would consider to be more of a dark sky type compliant fixtures. So that way we're not shining into neighboring properties, residences and the like. So the lighting would be contained within the site parameters itself to help make sure to avoid any concerns there. If there's any other questions, we also have Colleen Engineering here. The owner, Bruce Colleen, is here, our civil engineer and partner on this team. So if there's any questions for Veneclause and Construction or for Bruce, we are happy to answer those as well.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Good. Thank you. Everybody good to open public hearing? Perfect. At this time, we will open public hearing for anyone here to speak against or for this projected apartments. Good evening.
Good evening. Sherry Smolman, I'm a resident of the city of Cadillac, and I've been involved with Alliance for Economic Success, and I am on the Human Services Leadership Council. Thank you, Carrie, for already giving an introduction to the huge housing need in the community. And Kevin, your personal experience and your feelings about it, I think, are echoed by so many people who moved into Cadillac. And I've had the pleasure of, having several different professional positions during my career here, different careers. And one of the things I was always trying to do is find housing for people. And I would get phone calls all the time. Sherry, do you know of anybody? And it was always word of mouth because there's nothing out there on the streets. My comments. I am a support of this housing development, and I'm really happy that it'll bring new residential development within the core downtown area that hasn't seen this kind of development for years. This site has walkability, has access to recreation activities, access to schools, to churches, to the library, to businesses, to food, to shopping, to restaurants, to gas. It has it all. And look at it now, there's nothing there. And so to have this brought into, to be an asset to the downtown with all those other lovely things that are going down there is really a bonus. The location builds upon strong planning principles of concentrated growth where there are existing services. And additionally, this project will address a huge housing gap in our community, a gap which isn't there just for people of low income. It's there for all income levels. The last thing I want to say is that the Bowens research study that Housing North did last year also talked about the condition of a lot of the housing stock in the Cadillac area and how poor it is. And so this will just add to that, bringing new housing stock into the community on top of the already existing huge need. It's great. So I appreciate your commitment to paving the way to make development easy and as smooth as possible for prospective builders. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Evening.
Johnny. Steve Pavarski. I just had a couple questions on what is the minimum square footage if you're building a new home in the city limits, John?
There is no minimum square footage for homes in the city. If there is one, it's derived from the building code and not from the zoning ordinance.
I see. Okay. Will there be any brownfield help on this project? Also, what is the price per unit? What's the rental going to cost per unit? And I'm kind of curious about the that you can have as small as 425 square foot units, because I thought there was like 1,050 minimum square foot on a new home. No, okay. Will there be will these rentals be subsidized? And The last thing is, will there be tax abatements helping the construction of it? Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
I've been here too often lately, so I'll keep it short.
Well, welcome anyway.
Not just here, the city council too.
You know.
So my name's Jeremy Winkle, and I could be here representing about 10 different organizations. But mostly I'm representing our business, which is Vandry Home Furnishings. And we're a larger employer in town. Nothing like the manufacturers, but we've been here for pushing 70 years. And housing is a huge, huge issue. And fortunately, we touch Big Rapids. And housing isn't an issue in Big Rapids yet. But when the battery plant comes in, it's going to be. And we are in Traverse City. And Traverse City's building apartments like you wouldn't believe. The problem is they're $1,500 or $2,000 for a studio that was just asked about. My nephew just moved in. And so I think Cadillac could be a great bedroom community for both of those communities if we could figure out a way to do housing and do it right and keep the people here versus moving into other communities. So I also chair AES, which is the local economic development board. Been part of that for the last 5 years. When I started that, all the conversations were all about housing or apartments or low income or. And I think that has to go away, and it has to be and. Every type of housing this community needs. And whatever you guys can do to help facilitate that, we have a gentleman here who developed the condos across the street. We have a developer who wants to spend money in our community, and whatever you guys can do to allow that to happen within the realm of what needs to happen in our community, I think we have to push forward like you never pushed forward before. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy. Evening, sir.
Good evening. My name is Jim Shout, and I am here to represent the estate of Leo Shout. Leo passed away in February, and I think about this esteemed group here. Knowing my dad, Leo probably would have addressed this group back when he was one of the original partners of 301 Lakeside, who I've seen pictures of. And I remember him describing the drainage. I remember him talking about the site plan. I remember him talking about the construction. In many ways, he was the single professional engineer that took the place of what you guys are currently going to be undertaking. And so at any rate, that's just a little bit of history. I remember all the stories about the need for housing, and this goes back many years now. I remember what he was talking about, the elevators, how we need this. We have to have access to the upper floors. And I look at this development as really kind of a continuation of that. But with that, I just have a couple points. One of the things with 301 that's related to the new project is there's two parking spaces that are dedicated to 301 that are maybe not being considered or accounted for in the calculations for parking space. So in fairness to the homeowners association across the street, that's something that needs to be taken care of. And I just am thankful for being able to see what's going on, because it does impact the settlement of Leo's estate. And currently we are in litigation which may or may not impact the project. So appreciate the time, and thank you.
Thank you, Jim.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'll I'll sign this in a second. My name's Amy Kotelsky. I'm the director at Club Cadillac, where we help adults with mental illness in their recovery journey, where we focus on strengths and abilities. So a lot of our members are in the workforce in this community, but they have subpar or are rooming with people or are living in adult foster care homes when they don't need to be. We have members at the shelter. They don't need to be. There is a housing shortage in this area. Our members need housing. Our community needs housing. This will help a lot of our members by creating opportunities for the members that are working, but it'll also help reduce competition in the other vacancies in the community as well, so that there's more opportunity for our members to find housing in the community. On a personal note, I'm also moving to Cadillac in January. Finding a rental was scary. It was really scary. I have a small family. We were there for a minute, like we don't know if when we sell our house, we're gonna have somewhere to go because there were so few rentals available in this area. So I've personally been affected by this as well recently. Like I said, we're moving in January. We found a place, luckily, but we weren't sure we were going to for a minute. So this is another opportunity for that, where we're a dual income household and couldn't find a rental available in Cadillac. So this opens up even more opportunities, like we're saying, for our workforce, but also for people that are currently living here and that need housing now. So my recommendation would be to support this proposal. And now I'll sign the paper.
Perfect. Thank you, Amy.
Yes.
And welcome to our area.
Thank you.
Hello,
Hi.
my name is Kevin Wilson. I am born and primarily raised in Traverse City, Michigan, moved to Cadillac and graduated from Cadillac High School. After graduating, moved up to Marquette, Michigan, graduated from Northern Michigan University. Was away for a long time, came back 2014, and originally couldn't find a place to live. My mom lived in town. She's passed away now, but eventually found a place. I lived above what is now Simply Delightful in an apartment that I would say is less than ideal, but that's all I could find. And it worked. I lived there for a couple of years, and since then I've bought a house on West Bremer Street, 131. It's right on the north. I walked across the proposed site to get here. I have a garage that is actually on the alleyway that leads to the former Pell's, and I think it's now called the House of Games. So I'm in support of the project. I think it's great. I'm kind of a city kind of a guy. I like the fact that where I live, I can walk to downtown businesses, restaurants, establishments. I'm a block from the bike path. I love that part of it, and I think the buildings look beautiful. I think the type of clientele you're trying to attract would actually probably improve my property value. So I'm in support of it. I do have a question about that alley that I was referring to that goes right behind my property. I have a garage on that alley, and how the site would affect that alley. And probably the one on the south side too there's an alley there that leads to the Mercantile Bank, I think. And how would it would affect, especially the one on the north side that goes right by my property. I don't know if you're aware, but since G&D moved in there, that alley that goes by my garage is really busy. In fact, it's not wide enough for two vehicles, and I would say 9 times out of 10 that I'm pulling in to go into my garage, I meet a car coming the other way, or there's one right behind me. And so they end up going over into the property of the proposed site to get by each other, and it's tearing that kind of up a little bit. So I don't know if you've thought about that, but that's something to consider. But yeah, I'm in support of the project.
Good observation on that problem.
Yeah, it's a little annoying, I'm not gonna lie, all the vehicles going in and out of G&D, but I get it. It's a good access to G&D, and I do like to have G&D there. I do like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Welcome back to the area again after all your circles. So. Any other inputs? Randy?
Hey, what's up?
Wow. Waiting to see what you got to say on this part.
I oppose this project. This housing project doesn't fit the area. Ever since our city manager has come to town, we've been tweaking ordinances, amending ordinances to allow this stuff to happen. And nobody takes under the consideration the citizens of the people of Cadillac. So the city should not amend its zoning ordinances to allow this project to go forward. A couple of things we haven't thought about, water and sewer. It's going to put another demand on our water plant and our wastewater treatment plant because it's only, the capacity is only so many million gallons, et cetera, et cetera. So nobody's thought about that. And what happens is that the water and sewer rates all come back to the citizens of Cadillac. So, along with that, the water and sewer, the people will be paying for it, the citizens. Hey, it's a real shame that people can't find housing. Go somewhere else. We don't need you in Cadillac. What's happening is environmental and climate change, the stress on the industries, the pollution, the PFAS situation we're dealing with today, the drainage off of G&D and these apartment complexes. Where's it all going to go? Anybody considered that? It's going to go into Lake Cadillac. Everything drains into there. And what condition are our lakes in? They're terrible. We spent for the last 20 years trying to rectify the situation and cannot do that. So anyways, hey, with the housing shortage, hey, go somewhere else, really. You know, it's a shame, but it's too bad. I have four rental houses, and a couple of them I won't rent out right now. But anyways, what I want to talk about is the environmental impact that these new housing will have on the city. The area is too small to take on a project like this. And it's only going to benefit a certain few individuals. And so it's really too bad. I don't know if anybody's walked down Main Street in the morning at 8 o'clock. The pollution, et cetera, the emissions from all the vehicles, the semis, it's terrible. We bring in more people, and what's going to happen? It's going to get worse. So climate change, PFAS, environmental damage, we don't need it. We cannot keep tweaking ordinances and allowing these projects to continue.
Thank you, Randy.
Suck it.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Daniela. I'm an associate broker with Coldwell Banker Schmidt here in Cadillac. And I just wanted to say that I'm in support of this. I've been a real estate agent here for 27 years, and all of the concerns here with regards to housing are real. I was a participant in the Cadillac Lofts. I was very honored to help put people in that project. And I can say that I loved the comment about being market rate, not necessarily low income. And that is a wide range of people. That's just not new professionals. That's also our senior population. And Sherry had mentioned the quality of some of the rentals in the area. This is new construction. When I moved to town, I was 24 years old from Detroit, and I lived in a very small duplex out off of Boone Road where there was no walkability. So not only as a young professional moving into the area, but also a professional working in the housing force here in town, realtors get an opportunity to have professionals come in for the hospital, for some of our factories. We get an opportunity to tour the city and show them what we have to offer. And unfortunately, a good population of those professionals do not move here because we don't have the housing available. So I would say listening to what the current proposal is on the property. The property is just sitting there vacant. This is the highest and best use, and I'm in favor of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Danielle. Good evening.
Hey, how's it going? Andy Van Alst. You guys hear me complain all the time, but I'm not going to complain tonight. I think this is a worthwhile project. I like a lot of what Sherry said. I like that it's centrally located. I like that it's close to everything. I like that it'll bring to the community. High density residential stuff will answer a lot of the problems that we've been having. So, and Gary's done a good job with the existing condos over there. So he's got a good track record. And I was just thinking, geez, I wonder what it'd look like if that wasn't there. That's almost iconic. You know how they got those woods cutouts of like the library and all these things around Cadillac? That's almost that level. So I like it.
Cool. Wow. I gotta mark that one down, Andy.
Round of applause.
Decision made right there.
Any other comments from people way back or anything back there? No? All good? Sweet. Okay, if everybody's good, we're gonna close this public hearing and we'll kick this thing around. Okay. There was a number of things came up that I am blindsided by and I ain't sure who to ask what to.
I'll ask him.
Go.
I've got a few questions also.
Yeah, there were, there was reference to 2 parking spaces across the street not being taken into consideration. Can you explain what that was?
Yes, my understanding is the condominiums, when they were approved, the property across the street that this project is on was supposed to provide for those spaces. They mentioned 2. I thought it from our record it showed it as 3, but I'm not certain. I think Gary can address that. I think he's in the process of trying to solve that 3 parking space issue on another parcel. If not, I think there probably is room to take care of it on this parcel, but I'll let Gary address what he's trying to do right now to address that issue.
So it's 3 spaces that they need across the
They were,
street to accommodate their
that property was
residents.
supposed to accommodate.
All right.
Do you want Gary to address what he's trying to do about that 3 spaces?
When we built the condo, there's 24 units there, and we'd have 2 spaces, so we needed 48 spaces, and we only had 45. So that project was approved because I already owned some of the land across the street, not entirely what we have now, but the city allowed us to go ahead with the condo project with the 3 spaces across the street. Now, since then, most of the parking that we have in our project, there's only 1 car per unit, and we don't have an overflow problem. So I've asked Cindy Tomaszewski if we could, on behalf of the association, if we could petition for a reduction. And she don't think that we should because of unknown future needs. So alternately, I talked to John about, because we can probably get some space in the city parking lots. And that would have to be designated parking that we would ask for, and it could be approved. And during the summertime, there should be no problem. During the wintertime, when it's got to be plowed, there's an issue. And we haven't petitioned for that, but that would be our plan B if we can't get plan A to just ask for a reduction. So we have those 2 options. I think if this housing association won't agree with a reduction, then we're going to ask to have 3 spaces for overflow needs on the city lots.
Gary, question for you on that. Is that an easement that is granted to the condo development that's attached to the parcel here? Or is it in the master plan? Legally, how is that attached to the property? What's the obstacle there?
We had 3 designated spaces across the road from what, am I speaking correctly, John?
Yes, I haven't gone through the records recently, but when I did last time, we weren't able to identify where on the site those spaces were, just that the count was 3. So I don't know that there's any easement or designated area other than a requirement to do the 3.
But in this proposed development, we don't have those 3 in there. We have just enough to meet our needs. So now we have to figure out what we're gonna do with the 3 that we need across the road. And I think it's gonna go to we'll use some space in the city lots. But I don't think we'll ever need them because we just don't have an overcrowded situation.
If I may add.
Yes, Marcus.
So we do have, within a variety of our public city lots, overnight parking permits and overnight parking spaces available. Not necessarily trying to enter the fray of a discussion between, building owner and condo association, but that may also be an opportunity if the cost, which I think is somewhat negligible, of those permits gets picked up by 1 or 2 of the parties, and then offered should there be the need for overflow use from time to time. If you held on to 2 or 3 permits, that might be something for discussion purposes. Just throwing that out there. So.
Actually, I didn't want to part with you, Gary, yet. Please. The other gentleman brought up the issues of the alleys.
Yeah.
And I know I read something about, you're gonna be right to the edges of those. Therefore, what people are currently doing to enter that alley is gonna have to stop, and the alley isn't wide enough to accommodate. Yes, hi. Hello. Can you help fill these gaps in that we have?
Yes, Bruce Colleen with Colleen Engineering. Can we bring up the landscape plan? So we purposefully did not make any driveway connections to the alleys, and we've purposely kept those parking spaces away from the alley as well. So not only is there no connection, Mr. Wilson, where are you? There you are. But we've also provided screening too, so those lights are going to be shining right on here.
Oh, right. That was one of my questions.
So we've kept it purposefully separated, number one, so we didn't have to pave the planet or that alley to try to get two-way circulation in there because it's pretty tight. So, so anyways, you can I don't know if you can see the trees, but there's quite a bit of screening and trees in between. So it should not impact the alley. So, and if there's any other questions while I'm here, I can answer.
Just that alley isn't wide enough.
Yeah, and that's why we stayed away.
Yeah.
So.
Right now, vehicles use it like it's two lanes,
Yeah.
so they're going onto that.
So yeah, we're actually staying
Shut that down.
away from it. We can look at
Make it
maybe
one
even
lane.
squeezing the trees a little bit. Just
That'll do it too.
Try to make it so they can have to wait. It is really narrow.
No, I can't think of very many alleys in this town that are two-way traffic.
Yeah, but that's
So
part
it's
of it.
just a
No, I
standard alley.
understand, but we can ask
Yeah, you
Don.
can only go one way, but that's the way they all are. People just have to be as courteous as possible. I don't think that's
since you're there,
Paul's
You might be the guy to ask.
intended driveway.
Waiting on Dale, sorry. Snow removal.
Snow removal. Well, I guess that's going to be. We're probably going to have to push some away. We had a wall on the back side, but now we've eliminated that wall, so we'll be able to push some a little bit that way. But we'll probably have to haul some away or push it to the periphery as well as we can. So it's tight, but I have a feeling we're going to be hauling some away.
And I might have missed it, but is there an elevator in the buildings?
No, no, No,
Is not.
That was another
There is not.
question.
it's not required by
Oh,
building
okay.
code, so, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Accessible required units will be on the main floor.
Okay.
Okay, so, okay.
But the parking lots and all the site is ADA accessible, so we tend to always do that now, just to make sure that everybody can access the dumpster and even though the bike racks, even though they probably can't ride a bike, but and then all the ADA and all of the community assets are accessible.
There was also a question about whether these are subsidized units, and I believe you answered that question earlier. So, to Mr. Pavorsky, these are not subsidized units, they're they're market rate housing, yes.
And Steve also asked on brownfield. I want to say that was a yes, Marcus?
Yes.
It's not a brownfield, it's a clean site. We did
Oh.
do borings and look for around that. There was a railroad track going across there at one time, and we didn't find any contamination of that.
Oh, Marcus,
Marcus?
sorry.
So Mr. Pitch is right, and it's kind of funny. So, the name brownfield doesn't necessarily mean that there's any kind of environmental contamination on this site. And nowadays, especially after the state of Michigan amended Public Act 381, the brownfield incentive tool can now be used on residential developments, whereby certain key components that qualify are fully reimbursable to the developer. And I think that that's also where, some confusion comes in, because we hear comments, like some comments earlier this evening, about concern that somehow the city is involved in that in terms of granting dollars to the developer. And perhaps those are my words, not the words that precisely were used, but I think that was the allegation. And that really is not how it works at all. What happens is that the property owner pays property taxes just like everybody else does, and those property taxes, based on the value of the property before any of the improvements are made, are at whatever that level is, and then the improvements are made, and the value of that property goes up exponentially, and then the property taxes that are paid are at a different level, and that incremental difference gets redirected and put into what's called the brownfield fund. And then that brownfield fund reimburses the developer for their eligible expenses over a certain period of time. And so in this instance, this has already been through City Council, already been approved for the next 15 years. Once this all happens, there are eligible expenses that the developer, with their own funds from paying taxes, will then get reimbursed a certain portion of that until it hits the 15-year mark, or, and forgive me for not knowing the number in the sand, but whatever has been identified as the amount of funds that are eligible to be reimbursed based upon the eligible types of expenses. Eligible types of expenses include costs for environmental assessments, include costs for site preparation and site demolition, include costs for installing utility type infrastructure and other things that would make the site work. And so this development also has the full support of the state of Michigan. The state of Michigan has provided a grant, or will be providing a grant, over almost $1.5 million grant. I want to say it's around 1.4. And so, everybody, when I say everybody, the local unit of government, that being the city, your state government, are fully supportive of seeing this, this housing development move forward. And I know that, again, there were some comments about, concern over, tweaking ordinances. And I actually take that as a compliment. I think that it's a fantastic sign to show the collaboration, the strong collaboration between the Planning Commission, between the City Council, between your professional staff, where we're able to look at, regulations and ordinances that are on the books. In this case, we're looking at zoning ordinances that we did earlier this evening, and not be shy about talking about them and about what needs to be adjusted from time to time in order to continue to make Cadillac progress forward and to be relevant. And I think that we're on a real exciting precipice with this being the first development that you guys are looking at, and we have some more that hopefully will see the light of day. So thank you.
Thank you, Marcus.
I would just add that, you know, when we have the opportunity to create a development where all of the infrastructure is already in place, that's huge. And so, and this does that, water and sewer. Storm, we've addressed both water quality and quantity with the system that we're proposing. So we'll address that concern that was expressed as well. So, if there's any more questions, otherwise.
That drainage system, you're relying on our sand to?
Yep. You know, we had a geotechnical evaluation and we did some permeability testing, and the water goes right through. So we're going to take advantage of the infiltration of the sand, feed the groundwater, and it'll filter through. And I think we also have a proprietary stormwater treatment system before we discharge any overflows into the municipal storm that's out in the street. There's already an existing stub that is fed to this site that we're going to use as a backup, so with controlled rate discharge. So we throttle the discharge down before it goes into the storm based on the county's rules, and those are the rules we are playing by.
Good. Thank you for that.
Yep.
Any other questions before we part with?
Kind of an overall question for you. Trying to do a lot on a small section here. What are some of the biggest concerns or obstacles as a developer, as an engineer, that you've laid out and addressed and concerned? What are some of those the biggest obstacles and
for this
yeah,
project?
to get this much on this site,
yeah,
and meet all the.
So as a contractor, one of the things always on the forefront of our mind, especially on a tight site, and what we always put a priority on, is safety of what is going on the site. So tighter the site, the more stringent we have to be on how we're governing it to make sure it is safe for not just our teams, not just the subcontractors, owners, and the like, but for any of the neighboring residences and citizens alike. So on a job site like this, we would put a perimeter fence around the entire thing to secure the site during operation. So it'd have a simple access gate for our teams and be fenced off and then secured at night. So we would be definitely limiting access to the site. Part of what becomes part of the problem with this site, having two buildings, is the resource and space available for the construction of the site. So all of a sudden we've got a building going up, but we have to house everything that needs to go in that building. So the space is a constraint, which we will have to navigate and provide plans for and set up for. But this site isn't anything unlike what we are accustomed to. We have a site that we're actually developing that is barely over double the size of this site, with approximately 3.5 times the amount of units. So to that extent, we are confident and comfortable with being able to work within these parameters safely for not just ourselves, but others around us. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Will this be done in phases?
No, we'll be doing both buildings at the same time. Now we'll have one building starting and the other kind of trailing slightly behind it, but it's not going to be finished one building and then finish the other. However, depending upon the timing of how we finish the buildings, it is potential that we may look into occupying one of the buildings prior to the final completion of the other.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, you mentioned something, and you can tell me it's none of my business or none of the above, but you brought it up, so I'm concerned about a lawsuit. Is this because of your father and agreements, or you can just tell me none of my beeswax? I listened, and
Well, I'm one of 8, and Leo's estate needs to be settled. There's major differences in what, call it fair market value of the settlement would be. And so we are progressing into a litigant state.
Okay.
Fortunately, that's where we're at. We seem to have hit loggerheads. There's issues of integrity. That's been very well expressed, and when you lose that, this is where we're at.
So that can affect this project in a fashion that it may not go forward?
It may or it may not. I can't tell you what might become. All I know is there's been offers gone back and forth, and what's reasonable has not been, we haven't agreed.
Okay. I wish you luck in that endeavor. Anybody else? Anything? Yeah.
Could John pull up the motion again?
With all the things. Oh, there you go.
Laura, before they do any motion, do you have anything you want to add prior to some kind of vote?
She's on mute.
Laura, I think you might be muted.
You got her muted.
At this point.
Sorry, Laura, you were muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, yep, I don't have anything else to add.
All right, thank you.
I'm not muted now, right?
Can't stop
All
you
right.
now.
All right.
Are we allowed to add comments?
The first one says that all the lots must be consolidated into one. Would we do that tonight or another night?
I can.
No, if you approve with that condition, we'll just follow up with them to make sure that that happens.
Okay.
Right, so it'll be one address instead
One,
of.
I assumed that, but I
And
didn't
that's
know when
something
we
that
did it.
doesn't require planning commission approval. That would be an in-house.
Okay.
Did that, they did that.
Yeah, I don't have any big problems at all. Does anybody have any concerns?
Easement agreement. Thank you, Mr. Kurtzman.
I don't know if you want to do anything in the motion about those 3 spaces. You've heard all the different options.
I think we should cover our derriere on it in there in some fashion, and not sure who would be buying if it ended up in city lot.
That not be
May I add one more thing about the 3 spaces?
Sure.
So I just wanted to go back to the fact that when we looked at the amount of spaces that were required for the current new development project, that it was laid out that it really only required 54 spaces. We are providing 69 spaces. And with the calculation changing with the units for the 2-bedroom up to 2 cars rather than 1.5, that still only got us to 60 spaces. So we have above and beyond the actual minimum required spaces to technically account for those 3 already. That being said, I would stand behind the fact of what hopefully is able to be achieved by Mr. Pitch and getting able to allow for his current property to have only 45 of 48 under most current regulations. He's far above and beyond what would ever be required anyways for the development of that property. However, I think we still have that accommodated here.
Even if you remove your 4 handicaps, and now you're at 65, but yeah, okay.
No, that was included.
That was included.
So even if you want 2 spaces for the 2 bedrooms, they're still got 9 spaces to the good. And so they could take those 3 spaces out of the 9. And so you could condition it upon them being supplied in that thing unless satisfactorily removed by mutual agreement to another location, either a city lot or another parcel.
That makes good sense.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, you can do your first motion.
I want to just comment to the board, you know, and there was a ton of work put into this, and I think, you know, a lot of thought, a lot of work has been put into this. I think, You know, everybody, you know, does have concern with the density of it, trying to outweigh that. You know, one of the things that I think a lot of people don't take into consideration is because they don't see it, they don't deal with it. You know, Cadillac is any town. You're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. You're not holding steady. And we have developers come, and we've had other projects that they come. They have X amount of grant money. They're bringing a lot of money of their own. Construction costs here in Cadillac are pretty much the same as they are in Traverse City, pretty much the same as they are in Grand Rapids. Problem is, rents are about 30 to 40% less. So we have somebody here that's willing to, I'm guessing, they're not planning on getting rich and retiring on this. It's a pretty slim margin because our rents are so much less to build the same thing that they could go build someplace else. So, you know, to take that into consideration, that there's an element of risk on their part also. So I appreciate the work that's been put into this to present a pretty complete package.
Well, and I think, and I've said this before in public meetings, but I think Cadillac is very fortunate to have developers here and developers from other areas that are wanting to develop here in Cadillac, because some communities are not as lucky. You know, they do have the same housing issue that we do. They don't have developers knocking their doors down. And so, you know, I think that we've heard loudly enough tonight that there is a housing shortage, and we've been talking about it for years. And we have, and we have an opportunity to move it forward.
I don't know if this is the place. I'm interested in some of the things that Cindy brought up in her letter in addressing the traffic and accessibility off the street. And I thought you had some interesting points here that if you...
John, do you have that letter?
Yes.
Yes.
That have you spoken with the developers and so forth about your concerns at all?
With these gentlemen, no, I have not. I just have those concerns, and I just wanted them to be on the table. So
Okay.
I'm not against the project on the whole, just those items are concerns being a property owner across the road in the condominium. So.
See what John has to say on this. And I agree, valid point's good. I meant to bring this back around and I didn't.
Yeah.
I do want to add that when site plans come in, they go through a department head review. So DPW, utilities, engineer, police, fire, community development all looks at the site plans and addresses it as a whole.
Yeah, with respect to the turning movements, obviously not ideal, but then again, the county complex, their nearest drive is only 43 feet from the driveway into the condos, and their driveway is aligned across the street from the entry into the apartments. So again, 43. So it's really good that their entryway is aligned with the county entryway, but that's for a relatively small amount of cars. But usually you try to align driveways across from each other, which they did in the case of the minor county lot. But with respect to the overall numbers, I think with the staggered entry and exit of these apartments, I don't think there'll be high volumes of vehicles that'll create turning conflicts with the condos. Now, I think she raises a good point. If the Pine Street crossing needs something better because we're going to have more walkability, certainly that's maybe something we could look at, but I'm not sure we could tie it directly to whether this is something we should look at from the city standpoint or you know, what we should do about that rather than tie it directly to this project. I think it's a good thing to take a look at because we're bound to have a lot more walkers traveling into the downtown. Either improve the method of which the crosswalks are marked, or possibly get some other kind of traffic measure at those intersections to see if it could improve safety at that intersection.
Yeah, go ahead. I'll second it. I did the first one, you guys gotta do the second.
But you gave such a nice speech about this.
Yeah, that's because I'm impassioned with it, because I
It's
knew,
gonna be the most passionate support
'Cause I-
vote that you'll ever.
because I know what it was like when I moved here, so it's kind of near and dear to my heart. Okay.
Okay.
Got 'em up there?
Let me lead into it with the fact that planning commission is the very first step. And it needs to meet, city zoning, it needs to meet fire, it needs to meet all sorts of things. What's presented here to the planning commission, I feel confident in making a motion as recommended. I don't know if we need to tie the three spots into it. That seems to me that has a problem to be worked out on their own. And so I don't know if we need to add any other planning commission requirements to it. So
Okay.
I believe as presented here by staff.
It's your time.
Are you making a motion?
That is a motion,
Yeah.
yes, recommend the motion as written by staff.
I will second it.
Seconded, Mr. Fent.
Posher. Roll
Yeah.
call.
Yes.
Bunce.
Oh, yes.
Fent.
Yes.
Putvin.
Yes.
Van Pelt.
Yes.
Host.
Yes.
Rice.
Yes.
Pilkins.
Yes.
Bauman.
Thank you, everyone that took the time to present this to us, because it's a big project. And thank you for answering our questions and stuff, so appreciate it. We'll give you all time to leave if you like, because we still have something to discuss.
Perfect. Laura's in the lake.
Swim, Laura,
Laura, we
swim.
moved your image. You're now floating in Lake Cadillac.
The guy that
Beautiful lake.
The guy
It
that
is
used to
beautiful
own-
lake.
I'll get him after.
Good job.
He's gone. Nice job.
Thank you.
We'll be in touch.
Go out the door.
Now, the only thing we didn't hear about tonight was the UFOs.
No, we didn't.
What?
UFOs.
Except they can't come back in.
He,
He
are we
not.
doing that tonight?
Dale lets him in, he could, but.
Oh, I know, but I didn't see it on the sheet.
Yeah, it's on the agenda.
Son of a pup. That makes me mad. We gotta make that guy come on here and have him here.
I guess the question is it, does an overlay make any difference? I mean, is it, I don't think it does. I think that we're really covered with a special use permit because it gives us adequate oversight.
It
All right,
does.
Mr. Chair.
The only problem I have is I hate zoning.
That's why I don't want to do it.
Elevators were part of their puzzle.
I just don't agree with it, because that means anything can happen anywhere.
So let's go on.
So they
We
said
can go home.
people with handicap on
Main
Do we need to wait for Gene to come back?
We're ready when you are.
We'll be okay.
Mr. Chair, are we ready to move on to new business?
Sure, yes.
Why not?
We got one member that had to, anyway, take pause, so if
still have
all is
quorum.
We still
good,
have quorum.
not a problem. New business. Council request to consider overlay district to allow for bed and breakfast in RM1 district. John, sir.
Yes, as you recall at your last planning commission meeting, it was remanded back to the planning commission to take a look at what was proposed for putting bed and breakfast into the RM1 and RM2 districts. And your decision at that time was to stay with your original recommendation. that was presented back to the council. One of the council members still had concerns whether that was too broad an area to allow bed and breakfasts in the entire RM1 and RM2. I believe at that meeting his intent was to suggest that the RM1 districts, which are shown here on this map, probably from Chapin to North Street, would be considered, which would basically cut out the RM2. I do have another map that shows the RM2 districts. They tend to be in more outlying areas of the city, but if I think it was his suggestion that a subset of the RM1 district be considered, and that would be the Chapin to North Street, as to be used as an overlay district rather than allowing bed and breakfast by special use permit in the RM1 district. So I believe it was his intent to send it back to the Planning Commission to consider whether you would like to consider creating an opportunity for bed and breakfast by overlay rather than by special use permit by district. Laura, you can add to that if you think I missed anything.
No, I wasn't at the meeting, but listened to the recording, and it sounded like the intention, and it was a motion made and I think unanimously supported by council for the Planning Commission to look at the option of an overlay district in the RM1 area with a southern border on Harris Street and a northern border around North Street was kind of the suggestion from council for the Planning Commission to talk about. If there is interest in doing that, we would do a new public hearing because rather than a simple text amendment, then we're doing a map amendment. So we would need to provide notice to properties in that proposed overlay and within 300 feet.
Yeah, Laura, would there also be an option to not do the overlay, but allow it in the RM1, achieve the same thing as an overlay, but within the district? In other words, for that particular use, that it would only be considered in the RM1 between, within certain boundaries. Would that be an option as well?
I mean, when you start drawing boundaries within the district, I think you really are talking about an overlay at that point, especially when you're talking about boundaries by street. So I think the most appropriate way to achieve that, if you are talking about a defined geographical area within RM1, is to do it as an overlay.
Okay.
So if it goes to an overlay, there's no special permits, no nothing,
No.
It's by right?
No, you can still do it by overlay. Overlay is just telling you
where
within certain districts you can do the use. You can still require it by special use permit. But you could potentially be doing an overlay over multiple districts, although I think his suggestion was to overlay, well, I think he said RM1 and 2, but I don't believe there's any RM2 in the area that he described. So I think what he was suggesting is doing an overlay over just the RM1 within certain geographic boundaries, which I think roughly was from Chapin to North Street.
Yep, and it was just RM1 mentioned in the actual motion that council approved.
Yeah, it was just RM1. So in other words, drawing a boundary on the north side at North Street and then drawing probably a southern boundary at probably Chapin Street.
Chapin Street would include Cass then, because you're.
Right.
But you're listing Harris Street, which is before it.
Chris was named in the motion.
Correct.
Harris.
So.
Yeah, I think he misspoke in the motion because I think he intended to include the Andes property, and I think the area that he mentioned was not in the area he described. So.
That was clearly the intent, though,
Yes,
was to include
right.
the subject property that we know
And
would
that's
be
why-
coming forward.
And that's why I'm suggesting Chapin, as it takes in that block where the house is that brought this whole issue forward.
Right, and the planning commission is not bound to those, to any of it. Certainly, it was sent back to consider, but you're not limited to the Harris Street as a boundary, even though that was named in the motion, especially given the context of where the property that brought this to attention is located.
But essentially, if you move forward with doing an overlay over some subset of this RM1, the main thing you're doing is then limiting in the RM1 district and taking it totally out of the RM2 district. So you just have to be aware of that.
Laura? Question.
Sure.
From a liability standpoint of the city, if you do an overlay over part,
Greg, can you talk into the mic so Laura
Okay.
can hear you?
this way.
Into the mic, right in front of you.
Okay,
There you go.
perfect. Can you hear me, Laura?
Yes, thank you.
Liability standpoint from a city, if you do an overlay over part of a district, and let's say that, somebody that is now outside of that overlay, but the same zoning, is there any legal standpoint there, or liability standpoint of not including the whole zoning district?
Nope, there's no vested interest in zoning, and where you draw those lines is a local policy decision. It's ultimately a legislative decision at the council level. So there's no, I do not see any viable basis for someone to bring a cause of action against the city for that.
Thank you.
If it helps at all, I do have another graphic image that shows the RM1 together with the DDA district and the historic district, if that's at all helpful to you.
Is there an advantage to having an overlay versus it in the entire district by special use?
Well, the advantages of an overlay would be obviously that you could zero in on a smaller subset of that district. The other advantage, if there were multiple districts, you could overlay multiple districts and allow it across multiple districts in one move by virtue of the overlay. In this case, we're not doing it across multiple districts. We'd be doing it to create a smaller subset of the RM1. And if you believe that it's more appropriate in the subset area, then it would be something that would make sense.
What's that next graphic, John?
Up at the top. Up at the top.
This one?
Yep.
You see the same yellow areas are the RM1. You start to see the emergence of RM2s down at the south part, but they're not near the area that was described by the council person. So in reality, that's why I was saying you're looking, if you're going to do the overlay that was somewhat trying to move in the direction of the council person's recommendation, you'd be looking at creating an overlay of some subset of the goldish yellow color. And you can see how those areas relate to the DDA district, which is in blue, and the historic district, which is in red. The historic district is sometimes an area commonly cities like to do bed and breakfast because of a lot of times they'll have the larger historic homes and they're particularly well suited for bed and breakfast operations. Although the other fact is that there are some beautiful big historic homes in the non-RM1 districts. They're in the R3 district. So you wouldn't be catching all the optimal historic homes if you did it only over the RM1.
Perhaps just to add on, John, the original concept that was just simply adding the additional activity by way of special use into the RM1 or RM2 zones also wouldn't have touched the RM3 or the R3
Right.
either. Yeah.
Correct.
So John was just giving more food for thought. There are probably many, many ways that this can be looked at, as if you're looking at an overlay where you can literally paint little circles all over town regardless of what the underlying zoning is. If you
Right.
think that that use would be appropriate in that area.
And one of the reasons we didn't propose this originally is just because there's been a historic feeling through a lot of the community that people don't want to see more intense uses happen in single-family districts. You know, and in general, that's a good theory, but then again, there's always some exceptions that make sense, but then you have to work harder at cherry-picking the places that those things happen, rather than paint with a broad brush.
And so, as we're sort of tag teaming this to help with ultimately what will be Planning Commission's discussion here, you know, frankly, if it is still the intent of the Planning Commission to see this use, that being a bed and breakfast type use, be allowable, then any one of these three concepts would get you there. You know, the original one where it's by special use in the RM1 or RM2 district, or the updated one where it's by overlay, whether it's, you know, overlay version 1 or overlay version 2, you would still be able to require a special use permit in order for that use to occur in that area, which again means that Planning Commission retains control over seeing these things happen. They don't just happen by right. And then the last sort of, you know, asterisk to throw out there is that if moving towards one of the overlay solutions, that would restart the process, which is okay, you know, in terms of us. I mean, it's just how it works, in terms of needing to do noticing and another public hearing, and then another, you know, noticing and public hearing at the council level as well. So.
In some of the past statements from public, some of them thought it would fit better in an RM2, but we're doing RM1 is on our plate, correct?
Well, we're reacting to a request from, well, a motion that was made by a council person that received the support of the council. And so that's why we're looking at the RM1 closely now.
And looking at it, frankly, as you commented to me, John, a couple of times, it's correlation geographically to downtown, you know, to downtown Cadillac, to, you know, the walkability to the restaurants and the retail, and to the trails and the lakes and whatnot, you know, whereas the RM2 is a little further removed from those areas. But again, it's, that's policy, and that's Planning Commission's, you know, role. If you want to add it back in, that's certainly your purview.
You know, and the other thing too is that you could eventually have some people in RM1 try to rezone into RM2, because RM2 has a little broader scope of what you can do in the RM2 over what you can do in the RM1. So it's not beyond the concept that somebody in RM1 might want to rezone into an RM2, even if it was only to largely do the same type of development, maybe a greater density in RM2 over RM1 or whatever it might be. They could want to rezone from one multifamily district into another, just to gain some advantage of what the use differences are between the two.
And that's a good point. You know, we are talking about multifamily districts, not single-family districts, not single-family home districts.
Can anybody either on Planning Commission or staff, what's the magic to these boundaries of this overlay? What's the?
I don't think there is any magic.
So it could actually be anywhere in RM1.
But it's being specific in the request. How does one choose that?
Well, I
boundary?
think.
What's the logic behind that? Do we know?
The primary intent seemed to be just to reduce the geographic area that would be potentially subject to a bed and breakfast request, is the way I interpret it. But, you know, that's personal interpretation. The Mayor, you were there as well. Do you see it that way?
Yes. Yep. I mean, I look at this overlay and I look at it and say, well, you know, we could say, as a planning commission, just to maybe simplify things, maybe we just look at the historic district. That's where the big old homes are. And then we're not creating a whole nother, you know, spitballing at different parts of the city. I mean, I'm just using that as an example, right?
And is that, I think, John, if you can clarify that the image that you're showing shows the geographic area that City Council recommended to the Planning Commission to look at, as well as it's also includes the historic district area too, right? I mean, it's not
Right,
like it's
right.
yeah.
Well, parts of the historic district.
Right.
I don't see all of the historic district being yellow.
No, you if you only did overlay over RM1 in the historic district, you would be excluding a lot of the historic district. And the other thing is you're not evaluating any of the homes in the part that aren't being captured. We know that there's at least one, maybe more homes that are larger and well suited to a B&B, but wouldn't be in the RM1 district. They would be in probably an R3 district.
Which is something we never even talked about before.
Right, and the reason we stayed clear of that was a fear that there was going to be pushback over trying to get more intense uses into a single-family district. Not across the board, across the city, but even in a small area, we were a little gun-shy about that.
If I recall, John, you weren't aware of any bed and breakfast properties. I was a little confused when they said there had been some around here.
They said.
But yet, when we asked you about this, bed and breakfast places being around, obviously the one we've discussed, a lot of us were aware of, a lot of us have been there. But these other ones on Harris or North or whatever that they had mentioned, there had been bed and breakfasts there. I don't recall them.
I have no knowledge of other bed and breakfasts.
In our reading, it was brought up
I don't know of any.
by I think Mr. King. So that confused me because I was unaware of those.
What are you looking at, John?
I gotta find it.
Are there any others?
We had a discussion about it before.
Are you referring to the motion? Is that what you're referring to?
Sorry?
Are you referring to the motion or?
Mr. King had mentioned that there was bed and breakfasts in other locations in town. Had been.
I don't recall
Thought,
reading that
I
anywhere.
read that.
It wasn't in the actual motion, but yeah, discussed if there were other places that had been bed and breakfast in the past, that it might make sense to include them in the overlay, but I don't know if Councilmember King or anyone else knew what specifically.
Yeah, that wasn't the conversation.
Okay.
Okay.
Just thought it weird that he's mentioning a spot that they had them and staff wasn't aware of having them in the past.
You know, and if people know of specific sites, we can obviously go, if they have some idea when they operated, we could certainly go back and look through the records and try to identify if any have ever been approved. But to my knowledge, I'm not aware of any.
I just, I go back to all of the discussion we've had as a planning commission, and we're trying to find the right fit for bed and breakfast when we're talking about one property. And so why are we trying to spread it this big when we can leave it right there with that one property?
Because it's not an objectionable use, and it's well received in multiple districts in many communities. It's why would we impose a daycare center in a residential zone? Well, normally you wouldn't, but here we have it in every residential zone. B and Bs, you put them in where they're most likely to happen, which would be the larger historical homes near your downtown. So you're trying to find out what geographic boundary captures the larger single-family homes near your downtown, typically, and that's where you would like to allow it.
If I may also add, I think that part of the answer too is to be careful about doing, like laser spot zoning, where you're only allowing it in one particular area, and what, the parachute is, or the safety net is, when you do see it showing in a broader area, in a broader zone. I will keep going back to that this is not a use that anybody on staff has ever suggested in any of the multiple ways of trying to get options to planning commission to consider or council to consider. This is not a use that we've once ever suggested that it be allowed by right. And what that means is that, even if you happen to have property within any of the overlay zones, or if it's just a text amendment and you happen to be in a zone where it's now allowed, you don't have the right just to start operating that activity versus having to go forward through a robust special use permit process. And what that means is that the planning commission then can decide, well, okay, sure, you happen to have property within that zone, but it doesn't meet certain criteria, or it is, nestled in between two other properties that are whatever they are that would just make it an uncomfortable situation. There's not enough parking, there's not enough whatever, and therefore you would deny the special use permit request. So, we're trying to build in that protection as a way of.
And respectfully, I think we all absolutely understand that.
Yep.
But we've taken this forward twice now, and it's come back. And I sit on both the council and this planning commission, and so I'm just trying to find a place. What is the answer to this issue so that we can accomplish all of that?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I'll go back to my opening remarks after John had presented, which is, you do have a few options, right? One option, again, is if the intent of this board is to agree that we think that this use has a place in Cadillac, then, we believe that the original recommendation was within your multifamily districts 1 and 2, the use should be permitted as long as it's permitted by a special use, and then added to that lists of other special use that included all sorts of different activities, including commercial activities that are already allowed within that zoning district definition. The planning commission recommended on 2 separate occasions that be the method of allowing this use to occur. The city council on 2 separate occasions remanded it back to planning commission, with the last time they remanded it back saying, take a deeper dive in the overlay concept. And so, it's difficult to say that there is, a simpler way or an easier way, because, it's all really easy at the end of the day. You're either adding the special use under your list of special use under zoning districts that already agree, or you're basically taking your crayon or your pen or your pencil and you're drawing little circles around different properties around town in which you think that this use would be an okay use to have happen there, regardless of whatever the zoning is. The zoning could be anything, just to be silly, you could pick something in the industrial park. Hey, we think a B&B could be over here, and as a part of an overlay, you can create that, but you would still have that safety catch of allowing or requiring it to go through a special use permitting process. So I don't know if that necessarily answers or clarifies anything, but we being staff are just trying to digest what is coming back at us from our legislative bodies and giving you more options to think about. Regarding timing on all of this, I don't know definitively from the one property owner, what their timing is. I know that if overlay is the way to go, it certainly is gonna create, again, on purpose, some further pauses as we have to do new noticing and whatnot. But, planning commission can digest this and say, look, we'll pick this back up in, in December, or whenever your next meeting is. Planning commission can make another recommendation tonight. I mean, there's really no right or wrong direction with this.
The, maybe the proposed site that, came up a few months ago, just as discussion, does that now fall within the proposed overlay? Okay, so those that are here in the audience that are opposed to that, if I understand this right, it would still be in there in the overlay, correct?
I wanna say yes.
Yeah, that would.
Yeah, the property falls within this proposed overlay.
We have to
So,
design the overlay area, the geographic.
but the proposed overlay from North Street to Harris, which we understand is misspoken, which this is what's put forth, that property's gonna fall in here.
Yes.
My opinion, if it's going to be part of RM1, what they're asking for and the opposition that we're facing, it still allows it in there. So, and it's all governed by special use permit. It's all governed. It's all the discussions we had last month.
It all has to come back?
It all has to come back here. We can revoke, which we've done before. We've revoked special use permit. So the thought of an overlay when the opposition is still in the overlay makes no sense to me. And we've discussed this twice. And so if we're going to adopt this, then we adopt it. I don't see any sense in an overlay. If they were trying to remove that property, that would make sense. That would solve the opposition. And so either city council wants to make this decision themselves, or we're going to come back either unanimous or not unanimous and go, here it is. That's my thoughts. It makes no sense
So
to include the
reaffirming again.
opposition property in the overlay. So,
It does that.
it's just how I see
I
it.
agree with you. It makes no sense to me to do
It
an
opens
overlay
up
since
a
the
larger
property
can of
is
worms,
already
in my
there.
opinion.
Makes no sense.
And it's by special use permit.
Yep.
It gives us really good oversight over anyone who applies for it. And like you said, we can make conditions. If they don't abide by the conditions, we can revoke it, as we've proved we will do. So it doesn't make sense to me either, I agree.
Well, I'm just gonna say publicly that I happen to agree with you, right? This body of all of you who sit on this planning commission, we have made our recommendation based on staff, based on legal, based on the property owner, and based on the fact that the process will still require any request for a bed and breakfast to step through this entire process again. So should it come back to the council, I think it needs to be a different discussion, but
And if I may just jump in, as it appears that planning commission is getting closer to making a recommendation or reaffirming a prior recommendation perhaps, if you would please do that by motion, and then we can procedurally move that forward back to city council, unless Laura, you have any advice different than that?
No, I think a motion is appropriate.
go ahead, someone.
I would be happy to make that motion. We have discussed this and discussed this. We've come to the same conclusion every time. We feel well protected. We're doing our job.
We are.
Second.
do you need him to redefine that motion?
Yeah.
So you're sending back your original approval of RM1 and RM2
Yes.
amendment?
Exactly.
And Van Pelt, you are supporting that?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, and we have a second. We're gonna go ahead and do roll call. Filkins,
Yes.
Post,
Yes.
Van Pelt,
Yes.
Bunce,
Yes.
Bosher,
Yes.
Bauman, Fent,
Yes.
Putvin,
Yes.
Rice.
Yes.
Thank you, Danielle. Old business, none. Any board member comments that you already didn't hear? Communications staff, we have them all, yes?
I just have one quick thing. For members of the planning commission that may or may not know, the CCTV, Cadillac Community Television broadcast has been traditionally through Charter Spectrum and has also been available to be live streamed through both YouTube as well as a link off of the CCTV website, which is simply www.cctv-cadillac.org, where it's open to anybody that has internet access. You do not need to be a paid subscriber to Charter. That Charter broadcast, this I believe is going to be the last public meeting broadcast live through Charter. There unfortunately has been a change of ownership with the building that physically holds the live feed gizmo, just to call it that. And new ownership is not willing to keep that active until Charter is able to provide an engineered estimate for what it will cost to actually relocate that gizmo into this building. The latest update that I have is that that could take several months yet before we even know what that estimate is going to be. And so in the interim, meetings will still be streamed live, and they could be accessed directly through YouTube, or what might be more easy for folks to find is through the CCTV website. There's a link on the city's homepage right to that site as well, and our homepage is Cadillac-mi.net. So it's all there. Contact us if you have any questions. But I just wanted to let everybody know, a little change up. So,
Thank you, Marcus. We got all public comment.
And all the communications that we had were relative to that one public hearing case, and those were on your desk.
Okay. Public, I still have public. Welcome, as always. Any comments this evening?
Hi, Martin Dubravik, 406 East Chapin. On this issue with regard to that bed and breakfast, I'm not opposed to that. I think, though, that the problem is, and why there's, in part, I don't want to speak for everybody, but what I'm sensing is that there's opposition because the options were never laid out to you guys. I mean, it went back and forth to City Council twice. This is the third Planning Commission meeting I've been at. An overlay district, you know, it was too complicated, so it wasn't discussed at a previous Planning Commission. The other thing that's not ever been really elucidated is that bed and breakfast had a special use permit. And we don't know what happened with that. I mean, it went back to staff and nobody seems to know. And at the last city council meeting, it was vaguely discussed. So the research into that bed and breakfast and why it got a special use permit was never elucidated. And so could it be that perhaps under the current zoning that could be a single special use permit designation instead of changing all these districts and changing the zoning? Well, that wasn't presented because the staff didn't do their due diligence in looking back into the history. If they would have said, we can't find it, there's no information, dig deeper. It's got to be somewhere where that could have been found out, so you guys could have made a better decision. But you're making a decision based upon things that are just sort of piecemealed out, when all the options, one of the options could have been to have a bed and breakfast option for the entire city. That's also an option. I'm not in favor of that, but what I'm saying is all of these options should have been presented to you in an organized fashion, and then you debate the options with public input and you make a decision. That didn't happen. This is really just, it's unfortunate to see how this all played out, and you're going to continue to have opposition. Because another issue that was not discussed, and that's not been discussed, is enforcement. And that's a big part of the opposition to this. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Andy again. One of the options I haven't heard it discussed is refusal or reject the request for the bed and breakfast. I don't get why that's never been discussed or why it's not an option. The only reason we're here is because of that. It's not to upgrade the zoning because it needs to be upgraded. The the city council made a motion to approve the overlay from Harris Street, not Cass Street, not Chapin Street. And I thought, well, that would be a good way to find out if that's really where the bed and breakfasts were, because you would leave out the house that was in question that really brought this all together. And if there really is a need for bed and breakfast, that would surely prove it. And then you could go from there. But it's the fear is spot zoning. That's it, period. That is really what the fear is, spot zoning. So you can have a planning commission or a spot zoning commission. To avoid the spot zoning commission, you go, well, we'll include everything. That's worse. It's like I'm going to shoot myself in the foot. Well, which one, So I think that, I think that the people I talk to are not opposed to that house being used as a bed and breakfast. It's been a bed and breakfast. Me, I don't really like it because I think it's a short-term rental and all the stuff that what I think. But the people I've talked to, I don't think are opposed to that, but then it starts going everywhere else. And that's where the opposition starts coming in. And of course, they don't like the idea of the short-term rentals either, so.
Thank you, Andy.
Pat Ponzak. I think whatever I have to say is just going to duplicate what Dr. Dubravik has to say. He has a nice big old house. He's got a big old house and he just lives there with his wife. How could he do that? That's a big house. That should be turned into a multiple family place. And what he says, I of course always agree with him. Well, almost always. But you can't make up your minds about one house that's been used this way, that's suitable for this, that nobody has complained about it's being used this way. You're going to solve that problem by rezoning multiple blocks. You solve this one problem by rezoning big portions of the city. That doesn't make any sense at all. And then you're going to have to wait till the people who don't like the idea of having a bed and breakfast from all those little yellow blocks, they're going to come here. And we'll come with them.
Thank you, Pat. John, you're thinking about it, but.
You are. Go ahead. Go for it.
The subject's over with, you're already past it and everything. But before you did that, I wanted to say there are a large variety of dwelling units. Temporary or transient types are usually 30 days or less. And, besides hotels, we got a lot of different kinds, like men's and women's shelters, a son paying rent in the basement, Dad's place, a business owner or a night watchman, Fonzie above the garage. We have tons of different kinds of temporary or transient type rentals. I found on the internet, the undated memo from John Wallace that went out to all property owners and realtors back in early 23, I think. He says tourist homes, tourist cabins, B&Bs, motels, hotels, all offer transient uses less than 30 days. And now we got to deal with these new Airbnbs and Verbos. He further stated that rooming and boarding houses are permitted with a special land use in all single-family residential districts. Do you know what a rooming house is or a boarding house is? Bed and breakfast, basically. November 27, 2023, the planning board minutes referenced Mr. Wallace's memo and stated that codification of the zoning ordinance does not allow short-term rentals in any zoned residential district. That's not true. That's an incorrect thing that planning board did. We don't have a problem with short-term rentals except when they have become a public nuisance or violate our parking requirements. With a special land use permit and police enforcement, these problems can be addressed. With an overlay zone, similar to the Cadillac Airport overlay zone, we already have one, you can allow almost everything anywhere in town with any restrictions or requirements you want to place on it with a special land use permit. So you've got all the power in the world if you want to do it.
Thank you, John.
Steve Pavarski, 2208 North Boulevard. I'm going back to the point that the people who built the motels had to go through all the hoops to get them built. They had to spend all their money on the brick and mortar. They have to pass all the inspections, pay all these taxes. And now you want to take the houses that could be used for permanent rentals for people, because you got a rental shortage. You could be using these houses for apartments and solving that problem. Instead, you want to take them into a fancy moneymaker for mostly rich folks. And then you're hurting the hotels by taking away their business. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Good evening, Rick.
Hey, Johnny, how you doing? Rick Torres, resident in Cadillac, around 113 Otsego Place. You know what's really a fond memory of mine here in Cadillac, and it will be till the day I look at my kids' eyes and the day that I die and tell them how much I love them and how good they were. Yeah, there were some bad times, but we got through them. It's all about life, all about growing, all about learning. The neighborhoods that we live in, the neighbors that we do things with, the neighbors that we learn to rely on. I mean, you lost that dog that one night. We were all looking for Zorro. It was so crazy. But we helped. We all were looking for Zorro. Kids playing together, coming to one house on the block, because they always did. They always did. They always do. And they still do. And those are wonderful memories. These kids doing things that perhaps they shouldn't be doing. But a lot of times we're not out there every second of the day to keep an eye on them and tell them, wait, no, you can't be jumping a trash can with your bike. What are you, nuts? Neighborhoods are what our city's about. Being able to talk to your neighbor, getting to know your neighbor, to help your neighbor, to love your neighbor. You continue with the bed and breakfast or short-term rentals, and you start approving all that stuff, you're going to start losing these phenomenal neighborhoods. We have a housing shortage in Cadillac. Let's see if perhaps maybe some of these homes that might be available out there can get fixed up. I've heard some of them are in bad shape. Maybe they can get fixed up, and we can get some people to come in and buy these homes, to live in these homes, or even to rent them as apartments. That's fine. But if we start allowing short-term rentals, bed and breakfast everywhere, I got news for you. You're going to lose your neighborhoods. Neighbors aren't going to have any neighbors that they really know. Thank you.
Thank you. Everybody good? Okay, thank you.
I would just like to make one comment about Mr. Dubrovik. He made it sound like we didn't look into the bed and breakfast issue. We did do a historical research. We couldn't find the criteria how it originally was approved. We most definitely found out where the Planning Commission took action to revoke the special use permit. And no, we cannot just approve it by special use permit because it was done before by who knows what means and whether it was even legal before. We had legal review of this, and we're told that we would have to do it by special use permit, and we'd have to have a way to do it by special use permit. So we did it right, and those comments were just in error. I'm sorry.
Thank you, John.
A special use permit does not carry from one owner to the next, correct?
If you revoke it, if you don't revoke it, it runs from one owner to the next. But the Planning Commission specifically revoked it, and we had nothing on the books to allow it to come back through the process, other than the fact that it was done that way somehow. We don't know whether it was legal or not, and we weren't going to go down a road that wasn't legal, that's all.
It's also not a current activity at the property, and the city attorney did talk about it publicly at the last council meeting last Monday when that same question came up about whether essentially there was a way to grandfather in that use specific to that site that would then avoid having to do any of all of this. And unfortunately, the answer is that it's just not possible given the current use on that site and the history that John shared.
That would have been the easiest way.
Yep.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
Okay. Thank you, Marcus. Okay, last thing that's on our plate, due to how Christmas and stuff, we would normally be here on the 23rd, which I don't know how many of us want to do that, so is the 16th of December an option, which is the previous Monday.
Sure, if you don't mind.
Yeah, take it and run.
Yeah, so like Mr. Terry had mentioned, our regularly scheduled planning commission meeting would fall on Christmas Eve, which would be December 23rd. Right now, we have 3 applications that are set for planning commission review next month. All 3 of these applications require public notices and postings, and I was just a little bit fearful to go through all of that and then not end up having quorum. So I just wanted to have that open conversation on to, does the 23rd work for everyone? Can you kind of assure me that there wouldn't be a quorum issue, or do we need to possibly look at moving the date up or further out? Was just kind of looking for some insight from the commission before we go ahead and post all of the public hearings for the meeting and then end up having quorum issues as well.
Is the 16th not allow enough time?
So the 16th would, however, it's a council meeting, so we could move it to the 17th. That being said, my notices have to go to the paper tomorrow for that, and then they would be mailed Wednesday to be in mailboxes this weekend. So yeah, just looking for insight, recommendation.
Could you look at January? I mean, would that
We
be?
certainly could. January 6th. That is a Monday. Are planning commission going, or is council going to be meeting?
No, I would actually look at
Once you guys have your meeting on
maybe
23rd,
after
we'll have
that,
ours on the
to be honest with you,
16th.
because of the way the holidays fall and all that. Do it on a Tuesday, maybe the 7th or the 8th, right?
So
Oops, I know what I was gonna
how do you guys feel about that?
Like January 7th or 8th?
I can do 23rd, I'll just throw some numbers, see what anybody else has to say.
Show of
Mayor can
hands,
do
who can do the
23rd.
23rd?
It's not ideal, but.
I probably can do it. I just don't know exactly what the family's doing yet.
Okay, we have to have 5 for a quorum.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
You'll have
So
five.
you'll have 5.
We're good
There
at
you
the
go.
23rd? Okay.
That's the 23rd.
Be normal, if you will, normal.
What's normal?
No, I have no idea.
A lot of fun that night.
Times they are changing.
Yes, times are changing.
It's good to be busy, good to have applications.
That's true. Been many, many months we haven't.
Yeah.
Sorry, Danielle, didn't mean to take your thunder. We good, Danielle?
No, you're good.
Perfect, we're out.
I love that.